Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a review, and it's actually a review of a fragrance that doesn't get a lot of talk in the fragrance community. Actually, the brand in general, I would say, doesn't get a lot of talk, and I think there are some reasons for that, but the house is Bois 1920, which this is not the box for it. This is actually the box for Real Patchouli, but I will do a review on Real Patchouli as well because it's actually one of my favorite patchouli scents. These are the vintage eau de toilette boxes. We'll talk a little bit about some of the changes that have gone on with the brand, but I really like the packaging and I like the bottles. The bottles have this kind of frosted feel here and clear on top, and they have this almost wood looking cap. Here's the bottle for Vetiver Ambrato, which I have the box. I just couldn't find it. Honestly, I should start with the box because I need to pick the box first, and then it's easy for me to find the fragrance. Finding the box when I'm trying to match it to a specific fragrance, damn near impossible. But you can see I put a pretty damn good dent in this bottle. This is the vintage eau de toilette, which now they do not make the eau de toilettes any longer. They now all come in eau de parfum, and Morris Parma is no longer the distributor, which we'll talk a little bit about that in the future as well. But I just want to show you guys something real quick. It comes with this beautiful book, and since actually this is, or these old vintage bottles came with the beautiful book, since it is a house that I don't think I've ever done an individual review on. I can't remember, but I have Sushi Imperial, I have Real Patchouli, I have Bois 1920 Extreme, so there will be some more reviews from this house. There's a couple from this house I really rate, but there's a lot I have not smelled. So, I mean, that's just it's pretty common thread in FragCom because there's so much out there. It's impossible to smell everything. But there's a little deal where it says the origin. So I just want to read you a little bit about the backstory of the house. We're in the 1920s, and by the way, if you are perceptive, Bois 1920 is because the house was originally founded in the 1920s. Go figure. But it says, we're in the 20s and jazz music gets popular in the States. It is the beginning of sound cinemas and TV, and on the Florentine Hills, this is the time when the forefather of Galardi family, Guido, gives shape to his inspiration in the art of perfumery. The smell of just picked lavender flowers, Spigio, fostered his dream to create in Florence something unmistakable, a workshop for intimate fragrances, the workshop for Italian lavender, Bottega Italiana Spigo. This dream comes fully true with Enzo, Guido's nephew. Thanks to his experience and the strong passion inherited, he does not only create exclusive fragrances for renowned luxury brands, but also unique personal lines. As a maitre parfumeur along the years, Enzo turns the small family workshop into a dynamic company. Bois 1920 is born. And in 2012, the first international acknowledgments crowned Bois 1920 among the best 5 world fragrances as the Oscars of Perfumery, the Fifi Awards in New York. Okay, so this guy, Enzo, I believe his name is Enzo Galardi, if I'm not mistaken. Enzo Galardi, yes. He is listed as the perfumer, I believe, for every single Bois 1920 fragrance, if I'm not mistaken. At least every single one I own, I think he's listed as the perfumer. So today we're going to talk about one of the original releases from the house, 2000. Well, again, many of these formulas go back to the early days of the 1920s. So what they basically say about the house is that they opened in 1920, but they ended up closing in 1925 because the son of the founder basically had other interests. He kind of like Olivier Creed and Erwin Creed story is kind of what it sounds like. But the grandson, Enzo, however, inherited the talent and passion his grandfather had bestowed onto him and became a perfumer, right? And so when his own learning, experience, and skill had given him confidence and the necessary money, in 2005, he opened the Bottega Italiana Spigo a second time under the name Bois 1920. So it's almost like a house reinvigorated, if you will, okay? Turning the grandfather's recipes and ideas into fragrances again. So I don't know how true to the original recipes these are, but the idea is that these are older fragrance recipes that have maybe been reinvigorated, if that makes sense. So a collection of 8 perfumes originally from 2005. This is one of the original 8. was born. And either Guido Galardi was indeed so visionary as to be able to smell and create the fragrance of the future almost 100 years ago, or the grandson's reinterpretations are rather new compositions that are merely inspired by the old fragrances. However, and whenever the impetus for the Bois 1920 fragrances may have sprung from the Galardi imagination, the perfumes were all rich, artful compositions of choice ingredients. The precious flacons and packaging in noble design consistently continue the exclusive style. Okay, so there's a little backstory on the brand, if you will. So so today we're going to talk about Vetiver Ambrato. And Vetiver Ambrato, like I said, is one of the original 8 releases from 2005. And here's what the brand actually has to say about Vetiver Ambrato. Interesting because they list the fragrance as unisex, but I've often thought Vetiver Ambrato was very masculine to me. So here's what it says. Actually, Parfumo shows it as masculine. For some reason, I thought it was unisex, but I agree with that masculine designation, by the way. So here's what they say. Elegantly and profoundly seductive, an absolutely masculine perfume, there you go, that embodies all the power and mystery of modern men. These are the suggestions of the fragrance architecture for an eau de toilette that makes its debut with sparkling tonic notes towards a warm and spicy middle note to conclude with a virile, provocative top note that surprises again and again. Okay, so here's the thing about Vetiver Ambrato. Yesterday I did a review of Mustasables by Les Indemodables, one of the best niche houses in the game in my opinion. And I made mention of the fact that your perceptions of fragrance will change over time. No matter who you are, no matter how adept you are at smelling many different things, your fragrance perceptions will change, okay? And I mentioned in a video recently that my brother from another mother, Jonathan, 1970, claims that he made a great point, claiming that, you know, he's been trying to remove himself from, you know, he's trying to just enjoy the fragrance for what it is. Don't try to force it into a box. Don't try to compare it to this, that, or whatever, which sometimes you can't help but doing, which you will see with this review. But just enjoy the ride for what it is, right? This fragrance, Vetiver Ambrato, so vetiver and amber, basically, serves as a sort of powerful perception of that point. And it shows how your specific perceptions of a fragrance and thoughts can kind of change over time, at least for me, because I've had this fragrance for now 5 to 6 years, give or take. And I was so sure that this fragrance was a major ripoff of Shalimar. Okay, that Shalimar is one of my all-time favorite vanilla-based scents. It's a top 10 perfume for me. And when I smelled Vetiver Ambrato, I thought, man, this is a Shalimar-inspired scent. That's all there is to it. You know, what's the point of having both? Especially since I think Shalimar is better anyways, right? And all frag heads have done this. All frag heads know exactly what I'm talking about. You almost convince yourself that what you've smelled the first couple times you smell and wear a fragrance becomes gospel in your brain. And if anyone asks you about that fragrance, because you're wearing hundreds of other things, right? You may not revisit this for a year or two or whatever it is, right? You're off exploring other houses. There's always greener pastures to explore. That's the thing about being a frag head. You're constantly trying to smell everything, which is impossible, but you are. And so sometimes you'll smell a fragrance and you'll almost like put it in a little portion of your brain with a little sticky note with a description of how you believe it smells, and that is what you go back to over and over and over again when someone asks you about it, right? And it's not that you're lying when you smell it again in a year or two and think, wow, this is actually much different than how I remember it. It's that it literally smells different to how you perceive it in your brain. That's how I think of this whole song and dance that we do, okay? You see the fragrance in a new light. You also see the fragrance after smelling hundreds of other fragrances over the last years, right? And that's a big deal. And what happened with me, and it's a very important thing to note, but what happened with me is that I stuck this into this category. I stuck this into this corner. I said, this is a take on Shalimar, and that's all it is. That's a part of it, okay? There is definitely a Shalimar-esque vanilla used in here. You can't get away from that. If you know Shalimar, if you know Coty's Emerald, you will smell it in here, okay? Now, the fact that these are 1920 formulas are very interesting to me, though, and it does make sense that there would be an homage to probably the greatest perfume of the 1920s, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know why I keep grabbing this one bottle of Shalimar. There's so many others to show that I have in the collection, but this is the one that is easy for me to grab. Um, and so that's a very important point that I just wanted to mention before we get into this review. Now, the house now has changed hands, okay? So originally, the original house from 2005 that Enzo refounded was distributed by Morris Parma. Morris Parma is on here, and I had a sample actually that came my way that I was kind of exploring and working off of, and this also says Morris Parma on it. Both of these are the vintage juice, if you will, the EDT. Now the house is distributed by Arnoway, which owns Bois 1920, Olfatology, which is another niche house, and the one that maybe most people will be familiar with is called Profumo dei Firenze. Profumo dei Firenze. So Arnoway owns all three of those major houses, if you will. And they have changed things around a little bit. So Rich Mitch has a video on this house. I won't go into the details, but needless to say, the formula is changed to an eau de parfum. He made note of the smell being different to him. He had a bad experience buying a bottle. You can check out his video if you want more backstory on this. But all of my bottles of Bois 1920 are the original eau de toilette versions, okay? Some people have claimed these new eau de parfum versions are not worth going for, and quite frankly, I have not pursued any other fragrances from the house since the switchover. Now, there are some new fragrances that have recently come out, even as early as this year, which I would actually love to smell. I'd love to explore more from this house, but I'm just ignorant of the newest work, okay? So I have to put that out there. I've also never smelled the eau de parfums myself. I'm just relying on somebody I trust. So this fragrance, Vetiver Ambrato, basically opens up with this heavy, when I spray this bottle on my skin, which I just did about an hour ago, it basically opens up with this heavy balsamic vanillic, labdanum, amber, benzoin, powders, and from the base creeping up, these heavier notes creep up from the base almost instantly and mix with this bergamot in the top that makes you think of Shalimar. Instantly, you cannot get away from it. That opening from the bottle, Shalimar. And at least early in my perfume experience of the scent, I couldn't get away from it. Now, when I smell it now, you're going to get more. You're going to especially get more of the green notes, okay? So now my nose picks up much more heavily on Artemisia, which is this very green, vintage, woody, slightly sharp and herbaceous smell, if you will, okay? It's a very masculine note, Artemisia, and it's almost mixed with this very resinous and sticky galbanum, right? The galbanum in here smells much stickier than what I smell in the sample. I'll talk about some of the differences in the sample in just a minute, but it's almost like you took that resinous, thick galbanum from the Pure Parfum of Vol de Nuit, which is quickly becoming one of my favorite Guerlains of all time. The Pure Parfum is on a completely different level than the eau de toilette or the eau de parfum, and it really makes me want to smell more of the pure parfums from Jicky and some of the other ones I haven't smelled before, Chamade and stuff like that. It would be awesome to smell some of the pure parfums. But just imagine that you are sort of taking that green side of Vol de Nuit and sticking it on the top of that woody, herbaceous, sharp Artemisia, and in the top you have these multiple green notes, and then in the base you have the vetiver, right? And it feels like in the middle sits this vanillic, labdanum, benzoin, sort of slightly sweetened amber, which we'll talk about. And that's sort of the Cliff Notes 101 of Vetiver Ambrato. Now, while I've sampled both multiple times, you can see I put a pretty good dent even in the sample that I have. The sample opens up completely different on my skin, which is crazy, but it really does. Even today, retesting them before this video, they're totally different. I mean, they end up coming together, but the way that they wear are so different on my skin. This opens up much shyer, I would say. It's a much more reserved opening. the green notes don't open up thick and heavy and resinous like the Parfum version of Vol de Nuit. They almost kind of slowly and gently build on my skin when I wear the sample. And it feels like a much fresher opening. Like you're getting much more of the citrusy lemons and the bergamot much more prominently in the top, okay? Once the 30-minute mark hits, they come closer together, but they never come close together in strength, if that makes sense. And I'm just mentioning this because many people out there will do this. They will take a sample, they'll smell it once, and they'll make their mind up and move on, right? And if you're a true fragrance connoisseur, if you're a true lover of fragrances, I really would say to you, you are doing yourself a disservice if you do that. It's the reason why I try to keep as many samples as I can so I can revisit them. It's also the reason why I never sell bottles. I always like to go back and see how have my thoughts on the fragrance changed over time. It's a very fun kind of cat and mouse game, if you will. It's a great hobby, fantastic hobby. Now, I don't know if it's because here I'm spraying, here I'm dabbing, but I will tell you that I have literally dumped juice. I mean, juice to where it's running down my arm, which is what I did before this video. And it's the exact same thing. This is a much shyer, softer, you know, from the bottle, it almost feels like there's this hay, like tobacco and sandalwood and earthy patchouli and vetiver root thing going on, mixed with the beautiful bright amber. But the fragrance wears thick and heavy, and it lasts a very long time from the bottle. And if I judged the strength of the fragrance from the bottle, I would say it's an excellent performer. 10 hours, probably 10 to 12 hours would be my guess. It lasts forever on my skin. From the bottle, right? And my nose enjoys how from the bottle those heavier notes like you know, the hay and tobacco and all that stuff just feel heavier. They feel heavier on the nose, like it's a vintage fragrance. This one, even though the quality of the ingredients is very, very good, and I would even go so far as to say both of these give off a little bit of a Guerlain vibe, if you will. But overall, the sample just feels much lighter. It's not just the way that the notes appear, but it almost feels like the overall strength of the fragrance is much less toned down. And you know me as a reapplier of a fragrance, I usually don't complain about things like strength and sillage. I don't even usually talk about those because on everyone it's different. Depending on how much water you drink, depending on how much you moisturize your skin, where the fragrance is going, all of that stuff matters. And the weather matters. So I just don't get into sillage and projection and all that stuff. I just reapply. But for me to complain about sort of the softness of the sample is interesting anyways. It's probably half as strong or less than half as strong as actually spraying from the bottle. But as the fragrance dries down, what ends up happening is once you get past that green sort of opening, this very bubbly benzoin starts to kind of take over, and it literally pops. I know, a terrible sort of image there, but it literally pops, bubbly benzoin pops onto the scene with this creamy vanilla. And the texture feels gooey and resinous into the dry down, but it never turns cake pop sweet. And that's one of the biggest issues with me. And vanilla, it's a very tough sell for me. Very tough sell, because every time I go back to, I would just wear Shalimar. Why the hell do I need another vanilla fragrance? I have the best in the world here. What's the point, right? That's always what I go back to in my brain. And this one, I love how the green elements of the vetiver and some of the other artemisia and the galbanum and one other very important green note, which acts as a bridge, which we'll talk about. But I love how they add these different dynamics to this. Yes, you will get Shalimar. I think if you are a fan of Shalimar or Emerald or these vintage Guerlain style, you will get some of that in here. I don't think you can. I don't think you can not get it, is the thing. But I think you would be doing yourself a disservice to just say it's a Shalimar, it's a take on Shalimar and move on, like I did when I first got this bottle. So the balsamic sort of resinous character of the fragrance dominates. And all the bits and pieces and the details, I think, are what really make this whole scent slightly unique and slightly different, right? And it's also slightly musky. The scent feels slightly musky as it dries down. A little bit of the powders, like I talked about yesterday, of Mostasablas, a little bit of the powders and something like that. But it turns, as it dries down and the heart of the fragrance really opens up, it basically turns into this floral heart of lavender and geranium. And the geranium is kind of the bridge note because it acts as a little bit of a spicy element to the floral touch. But more importantly than that, if you were paying attention to my green top note and green base note sort of example in earlier in the video, the geranium acts as a bridge for those two green notes to kind of continue on unabated right into the dry down of the scent. And so what ends up happening is the geranium acts as this bridge because the geranium feels spicy, but it also feels like green, rosy green smell, right? Geranium can smell like rose, so much so that Jean-Claude Elena actually famously used geranium instead of rose in Rose and Queer. There's no rose in Rose and Queer, it's the rumor. He used geranium, and so geranium has some of that rosy green aspect to it. And here the geranium works as a bridge to take that galbanum and artemisia down into the base to reach the vetiver, which is a main note of this perfume. It also works to amplify some of those hints of clove that you're getting in the beginning. You'll really have to focus to get the clove. I don't get very much clove in this at all, but it's there. There's a spiciness that's there. I'm guessing that's the clove. There's no other spicy note listed. So I'm guessing that's actually the clove that you're getting when you get a little bit of spiciness in the first hour or couple hours of the scent or whatever it is. And I think the spiciness of the geranium kind of works to amplify that just a little bit, if that makes sense. So this fragrance I really enjoy wearing. However, I have to say that I can't help but think that, man, if this just had an animalic note or two in here, it would be a masterpiece. For me, anyways, for my taste. This has so many bits and pieces that I really enjoy, from the vintage style to the take on Shalimar to the green touches to all of these different, the quality of the ingredients is outstanding. It's a great fragrance, but every time I wear it, I go back to the fact that I'm like, my God, if they just had an animalic note in here, some castoreum or some civet or something dirty to keep my attention, I would be in heaven. Now the amber feels like it's kind of beaming at you. You know, it has this vivacious, sparkly feel, and that comes a little bit from the benzoin and the vetiver, which ends up turning slightly smoky into the dry down. There is a little bit of a smoky element to the vetiver here, and so it turns slightly smoky. And if you just imagine being mixed with that very dry tobacco leaf and hay combination I was talking about earlier, they work hand in hand with the patchouli. The patchouli, I'll tell you what, this house does amazing patchouli, because I mentioned Real Patchouli, which I will be reviewing at some point in the future. One of my favorite patchouli scents. I love Real Patchouli. And now, if you look at the two notes in the name, which again are vetiver and amber, Vetiver Ambrato, it's the amber, I think, that plays the bigger of the roles. Okay, the to my nose, amber is much more in your face. You're going to get the amber, you can't get away from it, right? But it's actually the vetiver that's taking me longer to unpack everything, if that makes sense. I think the vetiver feels smoky and rooty as it dries down, and earthy and all of that stuff. All of those, you know, it doesn't go as inky or dark as something like Encre Noir or anything like that. But it does have a rooty, slightly smoky aspect to it. But sometimes it goes away from that vegetal smell, of earthy vegetal smell, and it almost turns into a crisp green, carefree, like creamy, sort of smooth vetiver. And that's what really gets me about this, is the amber is the note that's in your face. The vetiver is kind of in the background, but it's moving around a lot. The amber is much more stationary. The vetiver's back here jumping around, back and forth, back and forth. And it almost sometimes feels like you're smelling a combination of sandalwood and vetiver combined, which is a beautiful combination. I love sandalwood, the creamy, milky, spongy sandalwood, very high quality. And that's sometimes what the cleaner side of the vetiver smells like in here to me, like you're mixing sandalwood and vetiver. Now, there's no sandalwood in the note listing, but I really enjoy the composition for what it is. I don't think I've come to the conclusion after many years, if I would have done this review 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said this is a clone on Shalimar, right? And while I think there are some parts of that, I've come to appreciate much more of the nuanced aspects of the scent, if that makes sense. So Vetiver Ambrato from the House of Bois 1920. I think this may be my very first Bois 1920 review, which is crazy. If that's true, there will be more to come. And who knows, maybe I'll get lucky and get to smell more from the brand as time goes on as well. But there's only so many days, and so, if you're going to focus one review on a fragrance like this, that means other stuff gets ignored, right? It's impossible to keep up. I mean, it's literally impossible. There's so much content and so many fragrances I would like to discuss with you all. Just for example, today, the guy who owns Perito Moreno, who I did a live stream on Perito. If you just go to my live streams, it's the newest live stream. His name is Nitish Dixit. From the old Dixit and Zach. He reached out, and I sent him the live stream I did, and he was like, "This is awesome. I'm sending you my 3 newest fragrances," because he had 3 originally when the brand started last year, and he's doing 3 more. But there's 3 more fragrances, million sample. I mean, it's impossible. Honestly, it's literally impossible to keep up. But I do enjoy doing these individual reviews and highlighting the fragrances that I really, really enjoy wearing. And this is one that I really do think deserves to be highlighted, especially if you have tastes like mine, and especially if you're in the camp that Shalimar is the greatest vanilla of all time, like I am. So, yes, that's my take on Bois 1920 Vetiver Ambrato, the Eau de Toilette version. So, again, if you get the modern Eau de Parfum and you think I'm off the rails, I've never smelled the modern Eau de Parfum. This is the vintage Eau de Toilette version. But I would love to hear your thoughts on Vetiver Ambrato. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the House of Bois 1920. As always, pleasure doing these videos for you guys. More videos to come, which goes without saying, but I do appreciate everyone who is getting us very close to 9,000 subscribers, which there will be some sort of a celebratory video. God knows what that is yet, but there'll be something at 9,000 subscribers, or maybe it'll just have to wait till 10. We'll see. But celebratory videos are coming one way or another. We are constantly growing. And so I'm loving the back and forth of the subscribers. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Chatting with you guys is kind of one of my favorite parts of doing these videos. So as always, it's a pleasure. Cheers, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.